Chapter 20. Back to Noah. Accidentally. Airdrie looks at Frank for a moment longer before he decides to follow Dam and get back inside Anne's apartment. Frank is still sniggering away as his blood seems to have boiled by the mere sight of Dam standing outside Anne's apartment. Nevertheless, after a while, Frank starts to walk away and is about to get back to his business when he sees Anne coming out of the back alley. He notices that Anne's left hand is holding his right upper arm, and with just one look at his face, one can tell that Anne is in immense pain. Frank doesn't miss a beat as he calls out, "Anne?" Anne hears Frank's voice almost instantly and looks up to see Frank in front of him, just a few strides away. Anne tries to wave at him, but can't do it, and hisses due to the pain being inflicted on his upper arm as he tries to move it slightly. Frank looks at him keenly and notices his facial expressions changing to one in pain. He can't help but instantly ask, "What the hell happened to you?" "I fell down from somewhere and broke my arm," Anne says, not disclosing the entire scenario that took place at his apartment a while ago. He has to deal with this alone, and he knows that he will. Frank looks at Anne's broken arm as he looks genuinely concerned. He can feel that something is definitely up. But before diving into the matter, he decides to check up on Anne as he asks, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, thanks for asking," Anne says with a slight smile playing on his lips. "Is there anything I can do?" Frank asks again. He actually wants to help Anne with whatever he's been dealing with, even if it's a broken arm. Anne asks Frank, "Do you have anything for my arm?" Frank responds whilst shaking his head, "No." "Oh," Anne says. He looks at his right side and notices something strange. He looks at a car and realizes that it's Dam's vehicle. He looks back up at Frank before asking, "Hey, is my dad here?" "Yeah, I saw that jerk going inside your apartment," Frank responds bitterly. Anne looks at him curiously before responding, "Really? Huh. I wonder why he's here." Frank responds with the same hatred as he had before. "Probably to steal or sell drugs or assault someone in your building." Anne looks at Frank again, who is standing in front of him, slightly towards his left side. He thinks for a moment before saying, Yeah, probably." Anne looks back at Dam's vehicle again. He then looks up at Frank and says, "I think my father keeps some duct tape in the glove compartment. I should—" Anne takes a step forward, towards Dam's vehicle that was parked just a few steps away from where Anne is standing. "Don't!" Frank calls out, as Anne looks at Frank again. Frank peers at him before saying, "I'll do it." Frank soon walks up to the passenger side door of the car. He makes it to the passenger window with just a couple of strides. As soon as he is near the car, he moves his right elbow straight up and is about to hit the window when Anne understands his intentions and calls out, "Look under the car." Frank's elbow stops mid-air. He doesn't hit the passenger side window, and instead, he looks back at Anne. With his elbow suspended in the air, he thinks for a moment before kneeling down and looking under the car as per Anne's instructions. He put his right hand under the vehicle and tries to feel something useful. Frank pulls out his hand back and notices two spare keys in a light purple, letter name word bead keychain, perched static on top of his palm. The word reads, "Heart symbol, you daddy forever," and as he sees near the words, there is a name that reads Crystal. Anne is waiting at his current spot for Frank to return. Soon, he hears the sound of the car's door being opened and then shut. He deciphers that Frank must have gotten the keys, as he hears footsteps coming closer to eye before he hears Frank's voice, "I got some first aid kit and some other stuff too." Anne looks at all the stuff that Frank is carrying. He looks up at Frank and asks, "Where's the tape?" Frank patiently responds, "The first aid kit is better." Anne says in a dull voice, "There's nothing in there." Frank looks up at Anne and asks, "How do you know?" Anne shrugs and responds, "I used it yesterday." Frank asks curiously, "Why?" Anne replies, "For my forehead." Frank asks again, as he doesn't seem satisfied with his previous response, What was wrong with your forehead? Anne says, It was bleeding from the stitches. Frank asks incredulously, You got stitches? Can you see the bandages on my head? Anne asks in a bored tone. Frank noticed the bandages on Anne's head. After observing it keenly, he responds, Oh, I see. Anne then asks Frank, And why do you have all that other stuff? Frank shrugs his shoulders and says, I needed some of these things. Anne says, Okay, where's the tape? It's back in the car, Frank responds as Anne stares at him. Anne is quiet for a moment. After a while, Anne says, Okay, I'll go and get it myself. Take these things. I'll see you later. All right, bye, Anne. Frank waves at him as he makes his way towards where he was headed earlier. Frank goes inside his building, and as soon as Frank is gone, Anne starts walking towards the passenger door. When he gets to the door, he tries to open the vehicle, but the door is locked. Anne then peers inside the car through the passenger window and notices that the keychain is inside on the floor mat. The duct tape is near the keychain's right side. He sees the tape, and there on the tape, there is an image of yellow ducks with an orange beak in a line, following a dull brown duck with a yellow beak. Anne has blank expression at his face as he exclaims with rage, Son of a bitch! Anne hits the passenger door with his left hand, trying hard to break the window so that he can open the door and get the duct tape lying inside the car's floor. As hard as he could try, the blow wasn't powerful to break the window. He looks at it while his hand is still resting on the window. Anne opens his mouth, and his eyebrows go up. He removes his hand from the window and then starts shaking it while walking around near the passenger door. Anne stops shaking his hand and looks back at the passenger window. He looks disgraced and disgruntled at the same time. Anne finally decides to leave the car be and try to get another solution for his injuries. He finally ends up at the walk-in clinic once again as he goes to get a thorough checkup and bandages for his injuries. After some time, Anne comes out from the walk-in clinic with his right arm in a cast and in-arm sling stock. Soon, Noah comes by from his left side and notices Anne. Noah looks at Anne and asks, What happened to you this time? A long pause comes for Anne's side, as he doesn't respond for quite a while. After some time, he finally drawls, I fell. But I'm all right now. The doctor said that this time it is much better, and my foot is, fine. What about you? Anne looks up at her whilst smiling. Noah looks at him as well, as she says, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Anne says, That's good. That's really good. So, did you leave my dad? At this question, Noah looks up at him once again and responds, Yes. Noah looked remorseful when she looked down at the floor mat. On her left side, there was Dam, talking to her. Airdrie was still sitting in the back seat. He was smiling and nodding to her and Dam, as she could see from the rearview mirror. Dam took the vehicle on the way to where Noah wanted to be dropped off. Dam's vehicle came to a sudden halt as they had reached Noah's destination. Without opening the car door, Dam turned towards Noah beside him and said, I was wondering if you want to do something together in the week? At that question, Noah slowly moved her head up, turned to her left side, where Dam was perched in the driver's seat, and looked at Dam straight in the eyes. One look at her face, and one could tell that she was immensely nervous at everything that was going on, and that was about to happen. She had started to choke up a little as she looked at his happy and hopeful face. She had to get the truth out in order to get rid of that heaviness in her chest. She looked at Dam and suddenly blurted as soothingly as she could in that state, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see you anymore. This relationship is over. With that being said, Noah looked down at her intertwined hands resting on her lap for a moment. After a slight pause, she turned around, opened the door, and walked away from Dam forever. Anne is staring at Noah as she narrates whatever happened the other night, after he was dropped off at Sleeve's Grand Motel. Noah says, I felt so bad about it, hurting his feelings like that. Noah's eyes are at the ground while she's talking to Anne, while he is consistently staring at her. He can see that she is still feeling guilty about it, and to soothe her, he says, "Don't be." Noah looks up at Anne again, as she says, "Your father seems like a really nice person." "He's actually not. But you did the right thing. You did good, Noah," Anne says, as he is still looking at Noah's face and still smiling. "Want to do something?" Anne asks as he gets a little closer to Noah. She looks at Anne advancing towards her and takes a step back, away from Anne. Anne looks at her with narrowed eyes, and Noah quickly says, "If you want to make it up to me, I can take you out to dinner tonight." Anne responds, "Sure, where?" Noah says, "At the Sheepdog restaurant, at 7 o'clock. Anne looks at her and says, "Okay." Noah cut him off as she says, "See you then." As soon as she says that, Noah walks past Anne and heads inside the walk-in clinic. Anne looks at her leaving and mutters to himself, "Well, better do my thing." Anne exits the walk-in and is now standing in the middle of a busy round sidewalk. He is busy talking with a middle-aged man. He smiles and then laughs at something the middle-aged man says, and then the man shakes his head and soon walks away. Anne watches the man going away as his face is still looking fresh and a smile is playing on his lips. After a moment, Anne is now talking to a lady who seems much older, at the sidewalk, near the yellow fire hydrant. He whimpers as he points his finger at his broken arm and shows it to her. The old lady listens to her for a while before walking away. Anne looks at the old lady's back as she walks away and mouths, "Fuck." He soon leaves the sidewalk and is now standing at the flower store. He is talking to the owner of the store. The owner listens to Anne before shaking her head. Anne turns to Zone and is now talking to Zone again. He also listens to Anne, but shakes his head just like the store owner lady. Anne is standing outside of a counter-restaurant food stand type place. He is talking to the cook. As the cook points to his left, and from the movement of his mouth, it's clear that he says, "Fuck off, brat." Anne gets away from that stand and is now walking on the sidewalk while his head is looking down towards the ground. His face starts to look very worried. After a couple of more steps, Anne sits down on the ground and holds a cardboard sign. The sign reads, "Need money, or else I'll die, or become deformed." Anne is near the edge of an alley as he's looking both ways on the sidewalk. He sees a person coming up ahead from his left. The person is thinner than Anne, and he walks out of the alley. Anne immediately starts walking towards the thinner man. Before the thinner man can decipher, Anne bumps into him. The thinner man punches Anne right in the stomach, and due to the sudden blow and its impact, Anne goes on his knees, while his left hand falls on the concrete floor. The thinner man looks at his frail body as he shouts, "Watch where you going, dipshit!" The thinner man walks away, leaving Anne lying on the ground as he has a vasovagal response. Anne is looking down and closing his eyes. He looks very depressed. Suddenly, the sound of water beginning to boil reaches Anne's ears. Anne looks very nervous, as sweat appears from the right side of his face while he starts to grind his teeth. Near Anne's right, there is a big pot full of water, as it is being boiled on a stove. The pot is beginning to overboil. Soon, a guy comes up to the pot and opens the lid. Since he opens the lid clumsily and has immediately put his face forth to look at the content inside the pot, the liquid bounces within as it's boiling. The water has squirted a little on the guy's face, and the guy starts to scream and covers his face with his hands. The victim shouts, "Oh, God!" The guy starts moving backward and shouts again, "It burns!" The victim spins around, and suddenly, he falls to the floor on his back, while still screaming out loud.